Greetings to all. This is Nihal Sadique taking you through my presentation on cargo architecture in the hospitality industry in Cochin. Before I commence with my presentation, I would like to quote "Less is more" unquote, by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. This aphorism is one of the most used in design and architecture, and he meant not a lot is required to make an idea or concept beautiful. Simplicity can also be beautiful. Need of the research. The main need of this research is to portray the greatest advantage of adopting cargo architecture, which is sustainability, mainly due to adaptive reuse. The prime reason why Kochi was selected as a location was due to the easy availability of containers. Moreover, Kochi is a place where land is premium, and implementing architecture there simply means paying less for occupying the space for which otherwise the payment would be in humongous amount. Moving on to the research question, the central research question of this dissertation revolves around the effective utilization of shipping containers after their life cycle. When drilled down to their specifics, the sub-research questions are mainly the degree of sustainability of cargotecture, particularly in urban contexts like Cochin, and efficient implementation of cargotecture in terms of suitable building material. Starting with the aim. This research aims to analyze the practicality of container architecture in Kochi by looking into the pros and cons of this form of architecture, then implementing it effectively, assuring the optimum utilization of resources. Objectives. To come up with the objectives of the research, a comparative analysis of all the components of architecture in the terms of implementation in Kochi, considering the geographic typology, was conducted. The objectives sought to prove sustainable aspect, its efficiency in terms of time and efforts, and the reusability aspect of which cargotecture was ultimately turned out being well executed in Kochi. Scope. As mentioned earlier, the prime reason why Kochi was selected as a location to implement the study was because of the easy accessibility and availability of shipping container due to the presence of Cochin port. Moreover, within Cochin itself, implementation of cargotecture in the hospitality industry in specific explains the scope of the research in brief. Moving on to the limitation, the first limitation could be the fact that the study is subjected to cargotecture in the hospitality industry alone, wherein the scope is specified and restricted to one particular sector. Second main limitation was that the limited availability of information through live case studies pertaining to the current global pandemic COVID-19. Literature review outline. To brief up on the literature review in this study, the main topics covered in the literature review comprise of the magnitude and history of cargotecture. The literature review basically looks into the primary and secondary published articles and data listing the various advantages and disadvantages of cargotecture, thereby providing a clear insight on progressing with this study. Furthermore, in the literature review, not only the architects who supported this was studied, but also the architects who found this not an appealing idea was also looked into. With the help of certain articles, the cons were overweighed by the pros. Michel Schwarzer and Professor Hans Laubach were two eminent personalities who supported cargotecture and gave a clear insight of advantages about the cargotecture. Apart from these architects, professors, there were implemented projects and articles on such as the London Container City 2002 were also studied and discussed about. Inference from the literature review. Now from the detailed literature study, the main takeaway points to be noted were the evident and the distinct advantages of adopting cargotecture, namely availability, which is the availability of raw materials, affordability, the price at which they are acquired and then remodeled, eco-friendly, sustainable feature through reusability, which makes it eco-friendly. Architecture proves to be cost and time effective when compared to the local construction techniques. Adaptability also makes the design flexible. Identified knowledge gap. On all the articles and theses that are published, there are few factors that aren't addressed or left unanswered, which has been answered through my dissertation. First point being its adaptable capacity. Cargo texture means this cargo texture's main disadvantage is its rigid structure, due to which it is assumed that there is a limited number of people it can accommodate. Here lies the catch. It is in terms of residential sector, whereas in hospitality sector, with a moving population, the adaptable capacity should not be a concern. Building typology. The other unanswered questions were in terms of building typology and climatic aspects. Every article published on these studies took place were confined those particular demographic and geologic typography. Methodology. This research has a mixed type of methodology which is data-centric and rich in terms of quality and quantity. The main source from where the data was collected includes literature review, live case study, and also primary data collection in form of phone calls to gather information. The following is the flowchart of explaining the course of action adopted, right from the data collection till the conclusion. Results. From all the data collected and analyzed above, a comparative study was conducted in order to come up with these results. So each of these initially listed disadvantages of cargo texture was spotted and corrective measures were given to clear up the hindrances. A gist of which being spatial utilization is where the term rigidity was struck off by ensuring to add more flexibility to the spaces. Concern regarding their strength and durability is struck off with the fact that these containers are made to carry heavy loads. Mobility and sustainability have always been the most positive and adaptive factor of a container considering their natures. Prefab and personal touch would depend on their inner instincts of an individual. It would differ from person to person. Discussion. Advantages were such that it overweighed and overpowered the disadvantages of cargo architecture. To prove that, certain case studies were taken into account and studied, such as Truncate in Istanbul, Dock 45 in Hyderabad, Cafe Infinity in Noida. Apart from these case studies, I had also conducted a live case study, namely Mazadine Restaurant in Calicut, from where the primary data of this research were collected. Conclusion. To conclude the dissertation, reverting to the main research question, which is how sustainable is the container architecture in an urban context like Cochin? In tackling this question, the report looked into various aspects of shipping containers, right from their manufacturing stage to their structuring, and also all possible pros and cons of shipping containers when converted into eateries or restaurants. Especially in a metropolitan city like Cochin. Cochin fronts one of the best natural harbors in the world and has been the center of trade for many centuries because it has been rightly titled a major port city. Kochi features a tropical monsoon climate. With its proximity to the equator along its coastal location results in the seasonal temperature variation with a moderate to high level of humidity. The annual temperature ranges from between 23 to 31 degrees Celsius. Pertaining to the geographical and climatic condition in Kochi, the central focal point and the concern regarding the adoption of container architecture would mainly be in terms of temperature and rusting tolerance and also means of isolation.